When a young college student goes missing, the father who adopted her pushes the police to try and locate the girl, but all of the father's involvement starts to make the police super suspicious. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to my channel and Killer Concepts, the place where we talk about all things true crime. My name is Peyton. If you are new here, please make sure to hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on your post notifications so you do not miss any future content. Last week was yet another week when we didn't have a video, but like I said before, if I don't get you one every week, I should have one to you every other week. So here we are. Today's story really blows my mind. Unfortunately, nothing on this channel ever surprises me because there is so many heinous people in this world, but this case just seems like one that possibly could have been prevented, and those always make me so mad, as I'm sure they do many other people. With that being said, today we are talking about a young woman by the name of Anjelica Hadsell, whose nickname was AJ. I will most likely call her by her first name or AJ throughout this video, as I am not very fond of using the last name Hadsell, as this is the last name of her adoptive father, Wesley Hadsell, that was convicted of her murder. I just don't think we should give him any more attention or the honor of using his name after the murder of such a beautiful young woman. So on Monday, February 7th, 2022, a 45-year-old Virginia man named Wesley Hadsell was found guilty of murdering his 18-year-old stepdaughter by injecting her with a lethal dose of heroin. He would then leave her body in a ditch where it would be found 5 weeks later. The murder victim, Anjelica or AJ, was a bright young girl. According to all sources, she was smart, athletic, and had a lot going for her. Norfolk Police Detective David Benjamin told Oxygen, quote, "She was an athlete. She was very outgoing. No issues with drugs or alcohol. Really was kind of flying straight." End quote. Anjelica grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, and often helped her mother take care of her two younger half-sisters. Her biological father was never really in the picture or part of her life, so her sister's father, Zach Hoffer, was the father and male role model in her life and would be for many, many years. Zach Hoffer married Anjelica's mom when she was a very little girl, so he would be the one who would ultimately raise her until she was around 14. After he divorced her mother, he would even have partial custody of her until she was pretty much forced out of his life. Hoffer believes that his daughter's death could have been prevented and actually devoted a whole website to it, which we will talk about a little later. About Anjelica, Hoffer says, quote, "She was so brave, even when she was little. She would jump from the top of a car or some other high place into my arms. She was so fearless and adventurous." End quote. In regards to her love for her little sisters, quote, "She was so delicate and caring. It was truly amazing to see the love in her heart radiate. She is one that would give love in action, not just word." End quote. I want to mention this is a very tiny bit of what Hoffer said about Anjelica. The website about her is absolutely heartbreaking, and I recommend you check it out. You can just clearly see the love he had for her. I have it down below in my sources. Now that we have talked a little bit about Anjelica and who she was, I want to talk about how her murderer, Wesley Hadsell, made it into her life and what eventually would occur. Like I said, Jessica's mother, Jennifer Wright, married Zach Hoffer, who would help raise her when she was very little. When Anjelica was around 8 years old, Wright and Hoffer would divorce. This was not a pretty divorce from what I had seen, and by all accounts. So according to Hoffer, when they would divorce, he would still have partial custody of AJ, and she would even stay with him sometimes. But as time went on, Anjelica was drifting further and further away from Hoffer until she was pretty much completely out of his life around age 14 to 15. Hoffer blames Wright for this. Around 2010, AJ's mother would meet a man by the name of Wesley Hadsell. The two would fall for each other, and it wouldn't be long until They would move in together and then get married. According to Oxygen, AJ would cherish the opportunity to have another father figure in her life. Wesley Hadsell would eventually ask AJ if he could adopt her in 2012, and she would agree. Wesley told Dateline about the adoption, quote, "I adored Anjelica. She was my daughter, you know. She was my family, so it just felt right to make it official," end quote. So everything had to be going great, right? Well, for a while it did. That is until on March 2nd, 2015, 18-year-old Anjelica would disappear while spending her spring break away from her freshman year at Longwood University in her hometown of Norfolk, Virginia. At first, when Anjelica went missing, Hadsell just seemed like a very devoted stepfather who was trying to find his daughter. You know, he spoke to news outlets. He went out of his way to try and assist police. But the police would start to see his behavior as a little bit strange. We already know that some criminals like to get involved in these situations and stay close to the case, so maybe this was his way of keeping an eye on it. When AJ returned home from college, she was said to be going through a pretty rough breakup with her boyfriend, and according to New York Post, Hadsell had just been kicked out of the family home for drug use and weird behavior. So the person who would really spur on the police to search for AJ would be Wesley Hadsell. Hadsell would tell police that the last time he had seen AJ was around noon earlier that day. He had apparently met her at a gas station and gave her $200 before she left to head back home. He said she was wearing her softball jacket from college with her name embroidered on it. Anjelica was also said to have texted her family that day saying that she was out with friends and she needed time. They claimed they thought she was just trying to clear her head. However, when AJ's mother, Jennifer Wright, would return home that night, she reportedly found a note from her daughter saying, quote, "Dear Madre, with everything that's going on, it's a lot to deal with," end quote. So where was Anjelica? Her family became worried. It wasn't normal for her to leave a note, and she had stopped returning their texts, and so they would call the police. Norfolk Police Detective David Benjamin told Oxygen that there were several red flags in the home. Quote, "The door was unlocked. There was half-folded laundry in the living room. AJ's wallet with money in it was sitting on the couch. All very odd," end quote. When they would speak to Anjelica's friends, they told them that she wasn't the kind of person who would just take off and leave without telling anyone. Nobody had thought she had run away. Even if she was struggling with her breakup, it just wasn't her MO. Due to this, police would start looking at the possibility that Anjelica could have been kidnapped or abducted. This is when they would really start to look into the people closest to her. Police looked into her ex-boyfriend. He had a strong alibi. Then, according to Oxygen, one of my favorite sources, obviously, a man by the name of Corey French, who had dated AJ in high school, would find part of her credit card on the side of the road when he was heading home from work. Police would at first think this was weird because Hadsell had told police that French had been obsessive with AJ, but French would tell police he hadn't seen her in months. Not long after the credit card piece was discovered, a mutual friend of French's and AJ's, Andre Barr, would call the Norfolk Police Department to say he found Anjelica's softball jacket behind a couch cushion in French's home. Due to this, police would begin investigating French again, but French would insist again that he had nothing to do with the disappearance of AJ, and he didn't know how the jacket had gotten there. There was no other evidence against French, and so the police couldn't hold him and they would have to let him go. This is when Anjelica's stepfather, Wesley Hadsell, would take it upon himself to sit outside of French's house blowing his car horn, and even had a pizza delivered to his house with the message, quote, "I know what you did," end quote, written inside the box, according to Oxygen. This case would get even more strange when more of AJ's clothes would be found alongside of the road by Hadsell himself and Andre Barr. Hadsell had said that they had found the clothing following a tip. Police thought it was strange that Wesley was on the forefront of most of the tips and information and now was involved in evidence being found. They also questioned Barr because he had now been involved in finding two pieces of evidence. Barr would tell police that the only reason he had found AJ's jacket in French's home is because Hadsell had told him where to look for it. So according to the U.S. Sun, Hadsell would admit to breaking into French's home to try and search for his stepdaughter, and this is when he would see her jacket, but he didn't put it there. So 2 weeks after Anjelica went missing, Wesley Hadsell would be arrested for the break-in. The Norfolk Police Department would search Hadsell's hotel room, where they would find hidden ammunition in the ceiling. Hadsell had no alibi for the day that Anjelica had went missing, and when police went to the gas station that he had said he had given her $200 at and checked the footage to verify that he had been there with her at some point, there was no evidence of them ever being there. Police would find a shovel, duct tape, and a hair tie in the back of his work van, and then they would look at the GPS in the van and see his activity around the time of the disappearance. There was one property that really stood out, an abandoned house in Franklin, an hour west of Norfolk. Why would he be going there? Unfortunately, police would find a body there. The Tidewater News reports that the Norfolk Police Department would come to Southampton County Sheriff's Office to notify them that they had located a body outside of a house in the 3400 block of Smiths Ferry Road, US 258. This body would be identified as Anjelica. A month after her disappearance, Anjelica's body had been found in a small drainage ditch covered by a piece of plywood. She was lying face down, and her pants had been pulled down to around her ankles. This makes police believe that there may have been a sexual assault. Oxygen reports that the medical examiner couldn't confirm the sexual assault because of the post-mortem damage inflicted to her body by animals and insects. What was even stranger, though, was Anjelica's cause of death. Per the Daily Mail, the medical examiner would determine that Anjelica had died from homicidal violence and acute heroin poisoning after being pinned down and injected with 3 times the lethal dose of heroin. Police would not find any evidence that pointed to AJ ever being involved in heroin or really any other kind of drugs. Her hair follicles would scientifically prove this point. But police would find heroin in the ceiling tiles of Wesley Hadsell's hotel room. His drug dealer would confess to police that he had sold him the drugs shortly after AJ went missing. When heroin had been found in his hotel room, Hadsell would be charged with being a prisoner in possession of a Schedule III substance. He would plead guilty to this charge. It wouldn't be until 2018 when Wesley Hadsell would finally be charged with the first-degree murder and concealment of a dead body in connection with Anjelica. According to the U.S. Sun, during the trial, quote, prosecutors would argue that after being kicked out of the family home by his wife few days earlier due to his drug abuse, Hadsell abducted AJ as she was doing laundry in the living room. Hadsell was accused of abducting the teen to sexually assault her, and prosecutors believe she wasn't killed until the following day, end quote. The Commonwealth's attorney Tony Colvin said that the bruises found on AJ's chest were consistent with someone holding an arm across her chest. She also said that the bruising on her chin was likely caused by someone holding it in their hands, and this is how AJ may have been forced to ingest drugs. I do want to mention that I did say about her being injected with drugs previously. This is just what's being reported, so there are 2 different things. Prosecutors would explain away Hadsell trying to be helpful with the police, saying that he was trying to distract them by lying and planting evidence in several places, including breaking into French's home, which he himself admitted to doing. The defense in the case would argue that Anjelica had committed suicide because she was depressed from her breakup with her boyfriend. They would say she had done this by overdosing herself on her migraine medication. Daily Mail reports that the defense tried to prove AJ was depressed by showing sad memes on her social media pages. They also said that the medical examiner never tested for her migraine medication in connection with the case. Prosecutors would say that this story was absolutely absurd, which I think by now we all know it was. In this case, there was so much evidence against Hadsell, you have him acting erratic and using drugs before Anjelica comes home from her break, which causes him to get kicked out of the family home by her mother. You then have him trying to insert himself in a police investigation, as well as hiding heroin in the ceiling of the tiles of his hotel room. To top it all off, his GPS is what led police to the location of this 18-year-old's body. Quote, "He abused her, he beat her, and then he poisoned her with heroin," end quote. Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney Tony Colvin told jurors during the trial. On February 7th, 2022, Wesley Hadsell, 45, would be charged with the first-degree murder and concealment of a body in the murder of 18-year-old Anjelica. The jury deliberated for only 45 minutes. This was the second trial in this case, as the 2020 trial had ended in a mistrial. April 4th, 2022, he would be sentenced to life plus 15 years for her murder, according to 13 News Now. At the sentencing hearing, family would be asked if they wanted to speak, and Anjelica's previous stepfather, Zach Hoffer, would stand up to speak about the pain that this murder had caused him. But Hadsell's attorney would object to this, and the judge would sustain the motion, and Hoffer had to be removed from the courtroom because he still wanted to speak. He would not sit back down, and he kept yelling at Hadsell. He would say that Anjelica was his daughter. One of the reasons Zach Hoffer was so mad in this case is not only because the 18-year-old woman he helped raise had been murdered, but because he had seen red flags. Emails and texts on the website Zach Hoffer created in regards to Anjelica and her case prove that Hoffer tried to tell Anjelica's mother that he did not want the girls around Hadsell. He didn't trust him. He had mentioned one of the reasons being that Hadsell's criminal record. Hadsell had previously been charged with assault and kidnapping. He was a felon, and I would consider that a violent felon. They weren't, it wasn't like theft, it wasn't drug charges necessarily, it was kidnapping. This isn't just something to shrug away when you have children. This would upset Anjelica's mother, and Anjelica would pretty much fade from Hoffer's life completely after they had an argument over this. Now, keep in mind, we do not know both sides of the story. The website is definitely a labor of love and proves that Zach Hoffer really did love his stepdaughter. There was a lot of information on there, this website, as well as, pictures of Anjelica growing up. It's just, there's a lot on it. Please check it out. My heart really goes out to the family in this case. A mother lost her daughter, sisters lost their big sister, and a father lost his daughter. When I say a father, I'm talking about Zach Hoffer. I am not talking about Wesley Hadsell. And she was also taken from her friends. From all accounts, Anjelica was made out to be an extremely bright young woman, and it is sad that she had everything just ripped away from her the way that she did in such a small amount of time. If she was still alive today, she would be around my age, and that's just crazy to think about. These cases, they're heartbreaking. It's so unnecessary, the violence, and that's why we talk about them. It's sad because you can't necessarily trust the people around you. This is somebody who is so close to home, which we see so many times, and it's really upsetting. And like I said, my heart goes out to her family. With all that being said, that is all I have for you today. As I said, this one upsets me, and I would be extremely curious to hear your opinion on this case, especially if you go on the website about Anjelica by her stepfather. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on your post notifications so you do not miss any future content. If you have case suggestions, please send them to killerconceptsvlog@gmail.com or comment them down below. You can connect with me on social media. All the links are down below in the description box. But before you go, please remember that the world's most dangerous minds hide in the most unlikely places. Stay safe.